আসসালামু আলাইকুম, আমি এমডি আজম লস অ্যাঞ্জেলেস ক্যালিফোর্নিয়া থেকে বলছি। আজকে আপনাদেরকে সাউদার্ন ক্যালিফোর্নিয়া ইসলামিক সেন্টারের উদ্যোগে ঈদুল ফিতরের খুতবা দেখাবো।
আল্লাহু আকবার আল্লাহু আকবার আল্লাহু আকবার আল্লাহু আকবার ওয়ালিল্লাহিল হামদ। Eid Mubarak, Eid Mubarak, Eid Mubarak. Today is the day to rejoice. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, للصائم فرحتان فرحة عند فطره وفرحة عند لقاء ربه. The fasting person has two occasions for joy, one when he breaks his fast and the other when he meets his Lord. Today let's focus on the first of those two joys. Today is the cool drink after the hard workout. It is the rest in the shade after the long hike. Today, let us say to ourselves what the Quran says to the people of heaven. كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا هَنِيئًا بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Eat and drink in good cheer because of your good deeds. So again I say Eid Mubarak, Eid Mubarak. But I should also be saying Happy New Year. Tomorrow, inshallah, starts another trek toward the next Ramadan. So let us together make a New Year's resolution. We have emerged better, cleansed, purified from our fast. But we have once again emerged into a harder world than the one that we used to live in just a few years ago. Alhamdulillah, for the moment, we are enjoying a bit of a lull in the storm of the COVID pandemic. See that East Asia, European countries are not so lucky, and we should rejoice in the blessing of this lull. But experts tell us that moving forward, our lives will be different, and that is the best case scenario if there is no new major surge or new pandemic. Some of us may feel that everything is back to normal, but unfortunately that is not the case for many, especially people and those in poor or marginalized communities. The CDC has released its first national survey of the mental state of young people during the COVID-19 outbreak. In that survey, more than half, 55%, said they experienced emotional abuse from an adult in their home. 11% said they experienced physical abuse. 37% experienced poor mental health. 44% said they felt constantly sad or hopeless. Alhamdulillah, I believe that as a community we have done much better than this. And I think it is a testament to our faith and to the fact that this faith has allowed us a measure of heroism in these circumstances. And I do not use that word heroism lightly. Today, on Eid, I invite us together to rejoice in this heroism and to reflect upon it so that we can sustain it in the days and years to come, inshallah. So what is heroism? Firstly, it is the courage and the strength to stand up to difficult circumstances. In 2015, when I gave the Eid Khutbah, I recalled the example of one of our greatest heroes, Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu. You know that when the early Muslims went to do their hijrah from Mecca to Medina, they had to go sneak out under the cover of night because of the persecution that they faced. History records that everyone did this. Even the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Abu Bakr, all except Umar ibn al-Khattab. He went to the Kaaba in full daylight, and he did his tawaf, and he prayed 2 rak'ahs, and then he announced, I am leaving for Al-Madinah. فَمَنْ أَرَادَ مِنْكُمْ أَنْ تَثْكُلَهُ أُمُّهُ أَوْ أَنْ يُيَتَّمَ وَلَدُهُ فَلْيَتْبَعْنِي خَلْفَ هَذَا الْوَادِي. Whoever of you wants his mother to mourn his death, or his child to become an orphan, let him follow me beyond this valley. And he walked out, head held high in full glory. We need to continue being Umars. Hard times either bring out the best in people or the worst in them. We've seen and heard the worst in people. And I don't mean just the hoarding that made it nearly impossible to get toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic. This country, by the way, was one of the very few countries in which that happened. I mean things like people who attacked flight attendants and restaurant workers simply because they asked to wear a mask. I mean those who forged and sold fake vaccine cards, and those who bought fake vaccine cards, and the numerous scams to rob people who had lost their jobs of the assistance money that the government was trying to get to them because of the COVID pandemic, and those who took out their frustrations on their wives and their children. We know the COVID pandemic brought with it an epidemic of increased drug abuse, alcohol abuse, racism, and domestic abuse. We need to continue having the courage and the strength to respond to difficulty with grace, and to have faith in the words of the Quran, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With difficulty there is ease. Surely with difficulty there is ease. We need to have the courage and the strength to make sure that life does not chip away at the spiritual progress we have made during Ramadan. We don't want to slip back into survival mode. We need to have the courage and the strength not just to keep ourselves from succumbing to depression or anxiety or worse, but to help those who are in danger of succumbing, those who have been hurt mentally and materially by the ordeal we have been through. We need to move from something good, which is not being part of the problem, to something great, which is being part of the solution. We need to become a force for good, a role model for others. And that is why the Quran says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. You are indeed the best community that has been brought forth to people to enjoin the doing of what is good and stand against the doing of what is wrong. I told you about Omar, that we should be like him because he had the courage and the strength not to succumb. But I did not do him justice, and I would not be doing you justice if I didn't tell you the whole story. When others saw him make his stand, they also migrated under his protection. Some sources say that when he left Mecca, 20 left with him, and history records their names. People like Zayd ibn al-Khattab, Sa'id ibn Zayd, Khunais ibn Hudayfa, and so on and so on and so on, just so that you know that they are real. So Omar wasn't just strong enough for himself, but he was able to give others the strength and the courage they needed in times of difficulty. So let me refine the definition of heroism. It is not just courage and strength, but it is doing what needs to be done in the face of difficult conditions. That is why in the Khutbah of 2017, I told you about Roger Bannister. Most of you are too young to remember that name, but let me remind you, in May of 1954, that was the day that a young man named Roger Bannister ran the mile in under 4 minutes for the first time in recorded human history. For an entire century, since 1850, when records started being kept, men had tried to run a 4-minute mile and could not. In fact, physiologists had started writing scientific papers claiming that it was physically impossible, doing an analysis of the biomechanics of muscles and ligaments and tendons and bones. And these articles didn't say it would be dangerous, it would be difficult. They said it was physically impossible. And it remained impossible until one man showed that it wasn't. The amazing thing is that 46 days after he did it, John Landy ran a mile in under 4 minutes. In the next 2.5 years, 16 more men ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Why? Because now they believed it was possible. So we need to keep going out there and showing our fellow citizens what is possible. It is possible to live a life of decency and integrity and charity and faith and to do good and to feel good, even in the face of something like a pandemic. To honor yourself, your family, your nation, your religion. But the fact that Roger Bannister was the first person to run a 4-minute mile is not really why he is a hero to me. The small minority of scientists who thought perhaps it might be possible said it would require perfect conditions. No wind, a dry track, and so forth. Roger Bannister decided to run in the afternoon after a rain on a wet track in a 15-mile-an-hour crosswind. And do you know what he did the morning of that day? Did he rest and sleep and carbo load or blood dope? No, to all of the above. He spent his morning working at Oxford Hospital. He was a medical student on his shift. He was a medical student from a poor working class family in London who started running because he wanted to study medicine, so he ran so he could win a track scholarship to Oxford. The world knows him as the athlete who broke the 4-minute mile, but he went on to become Sir Roger Bannister, respected neurosurgeon. What I'm trying to say is that great achievements can't wait for perfect conditions. So let us refine once again our definition of heroism, having the strength and the courage to do what needs to be done in the face of difficult conditions. You have shown that you have the courage. And today is the day to celebrate that and to resolve that next year will be the same or better, insha'Allah. God bless you. Ud'u Allah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. In between the first and second khutbah, I want to take the opportunity to reiterate what Dr. Saleh has been reminding us in terms of pandemic safety. Those of you who remember my father and his Eid khutbahs, he would always remind us that although we want to show our affection for each other, we should avoid shaking hands and hugging and kissing. Keeping ourselves and each other safe is the best way to show affection. If you won't listen to Dr. Saleh, or you won't listen to me, or you won't listen to my father, I refer you to the June 2021 issue of Scientific American. In that issue, the editors put out a statement. In their opinion, once the pandemic is over, handshakes and cheek kisses should not come back, and the pandemic is not yet over. So I ask you, please keep yourselves and each other safe, and please take this advice in the goodly spirit in which it was meant. Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. Now, as my father used to do, the second khutbah is the message to the youth. And this is the important part. You are what we hang our hopes on. You are the vehicle that is going to carry our dreams into the future. You are what we will bequeath to this country and what we will leave to this world as a testament to who we were. Your task is heavy. As I said in the first khutbah, the pandemic has left people vulnerable. And so you not only have to do everything you were doing before, now you have to do it under harder circumstances. When people emerge from a difficult time, their first instinct is to release all of their pent-up tension, to make up for the deprivation they feel they have suffered. For those who do not believe that they will stand to account before their Lord, it will simply accentuate their impulse to live for their own pleasure. To put it in another way, we have been created from mud and imbued with the breath of the divine spirit. Coming out of the difficulty of the pandemic, the impulse of those around you may be to move full speed ahead to strengthen their relationship to the mud. You are better than that. You have just spent a month strengthening your ties to the divine spirit and reminding yourselves not to be one of those who take their own desires as their God. As Surah Al-Furqan says, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you seen the one who makes his own desire as his God? You need to continue to honor Islam as it has honored you. I know that sounds like a formidable task, but you're already doing it. The report card on ethics of American youth from the Josephson Institute said that 50% of youth say they have bullied someone. You don't do that. In California, 1 of 4 students doesn't finish high school. In Los Angeles, it's 1 out of 3. You do much better than that. You are not part of the gang problem. You are not part of the drug problem. You are not part of the crime problem. So hold your head high. Your country needs you. Now you just need the strength and the courage to see the mission through. You have to live a life of purpose. So nowadays especially, when Nike or other ad slogans say, just do it, people around you will have the impulse to listen and just do it. You need to have the stamina and the courage to say no. when they feel they have just been released from COVID prison and they will act on impulse, you say, no, I'm not going to just do it. I am going to think about it. I live on faith, not on impulse. When the world around you says, enjoy yourself, just be who you are, you say, no, I will enjoy myself more trying to be who I should be. When someone says, why don't you just light up with their joint, you say, why don't you just put it out? Plant your feet and inshallah God will make your stance firm. That is what makes heroes. Let me tell you about one of my greatest heroes from my childhood. In those days, we walked home from school. I was a latchkey kid. This was in Buffalo, New York. And a kid asked me to come over to his house after school. When I went there, I learned that he lived with his mother and his older brother, and that his father had walked out on the family some years back. His mother is the hero of this story. She navigated her way through the harsh Buffalo winters to go to her job so she could provide for her sons. She did the shopping. There was no Instacart in those days. She did the cooking, the laundry, helped her sons with their homework as best as she could. And of course you're saying to yourself, well, that's nice, but hero, really? There are a lot of single moms out there. Well, first let me say that they're all heroes. But second, what makes this woman particularly heroic is that she was blind since birth. When it got too hard for her husband, he left. She stayed. She did what needed to be done, and like Roger Bannister, did it under less than ideal circumstances. You may still not be so moved or impressed by that story. Why is that? Because we've been conditioned by the movies that heroism is sort of a glamour moment. But it isn't. It's doing what needs to be done, not just in one photogenic moment, but day in and day out when no one is watching, because you know that God is watching you. وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ, and say unto them, act. God will behold your actions, and so will his messenger and the believers. The final iteration of the definition of heroism I want to give you is that it is the courage and the strength which we see in Umar ibn al-Khattab to sustain virtue, like this woman, in the face of adverse circumstances like Roger Bannister. Let me end my khutbah by reminding you of somebody that I told you about in khutbah of 2018, a 14-year-old named Leah Cherubu. That year in Nigeria, the so-called Muslim extremist group, the Boko Haram, once again raided a girls' school and kidnapped a large number of girls, 110 to be exact. After intense negotiations with national and international entities, they were finally convinced to return the girls to their families. However, it came to their attention that one of the girls, Leah Cherubu, was a devout Christian. They told her that before she was released, she would have to convert to Islam. Somehow they completely ignored the Quran's fundamental injunction, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Let there be no compulsion in religion, for truth stands out clearly from falsehood. And imagine her, a 14-year-old, kidnapped by these criminals. I told you then that Leah Cherubu refused to convert. 109 of her classmates were loaded onto buses to be released, and they kept pleading with her. Just say that you've converted. But she steadfastly refused. The last thing that was known of her is that as the buses were leaving, she asked her Muslim classmates to pray for her. On that day, in my book, and God knows best, she not only brought honor to her Christian faith, but she was the best Muslim of them all. That was the movie glamour moment. Now the cameras would fade away and the credits would start to roll. But what would you think if I told you that after the buses drove away, the next day she said to herself, what have I done? And she decided to quote-unquote convert, to say the Shahada so that her captors would release her. Would she still be a hero then? Well, that's an interesting question. Certainly, it was heroic to have the courage in the moment to say, I will not convert, and to let the buses drive away without her. That's more than most of us could do. But then to cave in right afterwards, what does that do to the heroic action? As I said, that's an interesting question, but thankfully it is not one that we need to wrestle with. 4 years have passed since Leah Sharibu was kidnapped. We know that she was alive, that she is alive, that she was kidnapped at 14, and earlier this year she turned 18. As far as we know, she has remained steadfast, a woman of her convictions. She has refused to relent, as have her kidnappers, and so she remains in captivity. Every year on the anniversary of her kidnapping, her family pleads with the government to try to press harder for her release, and every year they are promised it will happen, and so far it has not. But she exemplifies our more complete definition of heroism, the strength and the courage to sustain virtue under adverse circumstances. Young Muslim men, young Muslim women, once again, let what she has done for her faith inspire you to do for yours. Today, celebrate the end of Ramadan. Celebrate and enjoy Eid in good health and good cheer. And then tomorrow, remind yourselves, it's hero time. God bless you and guide your footsteps, inshallah. Eid Mubarak to all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.